complicated ones. So I'm going to go and go over some of the unit tests. So what we did last week and all you had to do for the assignment was basically it was testing the index and details views. So we checked that index loaded the right view, that it loaded a list of products, and we had few tests for details. What happened if we gave it no ID, an invalid ID? In both cases, we got 404 errors, and a valid product would load the selected object. Now, if we look in our product controller, we also have we've got get and post for create. I'm not really going to bother testing the get method because we know that should load a view called create. That's going to be similar to the test we wrote on index. We could also check that we have a drop-down list of categories. I'm not going to worry about that for now. I'm more interested in testing the post because there's 3 things we should test here. We should test what happens if the model isn't valid. So somebody tries to post a new product, but it fails model validation. So for example, there's no product name. In this case, we would keep the user on the product view and reload it. So if the model is invalid, we should get the product view being loaded. If the model is valid, the result that we should get is we should have a new product in our list, and we should also get redirected to the index view. So we want to write 3 or 4 tests to cover this method fully. So we've got an invalid model scenario and then a valid model scenario. We want to check both that the data gets added and that we get redirected properly. So I'll write these tests. If we do these, the post method for edit is almost identical. We've really got the same scenario. So maybe my first method will be we'll call create post invalid data. So what happens if I try and create a new product object, but that product object is missing something required, like say the product name? So here I need an arrange statement because I've got to create a new mock product in this method. So I'll say var product equals new product. I'll just make up, a new ID. Maybe I'll set price. Okay, I'll just set that as 9. Is my category global? Let's see. I'll just make a new category. I'm going to make a new product. Then we'll call act. We'll try to save the new product. Okay, so I'm getting an error here. It doesn't know what my context object is. There's a reason for this. We look up in my test initialize. We actually declared context only in initialize. So it's a local variable to our initialize method. So if I want to reference the database object, I should declare our context globally. Yeah, I think I did originally. We commented it out last week. So I'm going to re-enable it here. And I'll take out the var here. So now we're declaring it globally in the class and instantiating it. Oh, what's it saying? It doesn't like read only. Let me take that out. So it's no longer read only. So we'll declare it at the class level. We'll initialize it in test initialize. This should fix my error down below. Now I can call context data. That'll be product. Add context dot. Actually, I guess this should be in my arrange, really. This is part of my setup. We're not actually calling any methods yet. So I'll move it up here. So this is before we actually call the create method of our controller. So now I can call dot create. And notice it says there's two methods. The first one takes no parameters. That's the get method. We're not testing the get method. It's just going to load a blank form. We want the second one, post method, that takes a product object. So now we'll pass in our product. Actually, what am I doing? We don't need this. Sorry. Create a product, pass it to the controller method. So what should happen? What should the result be if we try to submit a product that has a validation error? Well, let's look in the method. So we're going to create a product object with missing name, which is required. So if we go back here and look at our method, so if model state is valid, we do this. But if the model state is not valid, ultimately, what are we doing? Right, so if I go to my right, it should reload the create view again. Go to /products/create. I may have to log in to do this, though I don't think so. I think we left this public. So the expected result, if we have invalid data, is it reloads the same page with all of the values that were entered previously repopulated into the form. Right? So if I leave out product name and I click create, it reloads the page, repopulates the values, and it brings me back here. So the expected result is that we're going to load the create view if data is invalid. So in my return view statement, just like we did for details and index, we want to name the view that's going to be loaded. So in this case, I'm going to modify my post method here and specify that the view name to be loaded is called create. And then our unit test can check that this is what loads if the model is not valid. So I'll save that. I'll go back to my test. And it's really the same test as we did up here. We'll cast it as a view result. Whoops, sorry. So now we'll assert we expect a view called create, and we can compare that to the view result view name. I don't think we need this. So we're passing in a product that doesn't meet all of the validation rules of the product model. Our expected behavior is we get the create view returned. Live unit testing. Okay. The test isn't passing, so let's see what's happening here. It actually returned a redirect result. That's odd. It shouldn't. With our well, let's see. So we're checking index load the correct view. No. The issue is it tried to redirect me. It didn't load a view. It tried to run. Okay, well, we'll better put on my debugger and see what's happening. I'll debug the test. Okay. So there's our new product. So let's see what happens. Our model state. That's interesting. Saying our model state is valid. So no wonder it's trying to redirect to index. Okay, so maybe we need to be a little more explicit about setting the product. Maybe I'll set the actual product name to null. Which our product model should not allow. We'll try it. So I'll save. I've got my live unit testing on. I'll just run my failed tests. If it doesn't work, then we have a workaround. No. Okay. So we have a workaround. Bear with me for a second. I put the workaround back forward already, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. I think what we want to do is manually say there's an error in our model. So, and here's why. Model binding doesn't actually happen during a unit test. So what do we want to do? We can deliberately add an error to the model state. This is what we're going to do. So we'll say products control the model state dot add model error with this DNMS error message. Error fake model error. So this will set that model state property to false. So now our test should pass. So the model validation doesn't actually run. We manually are causing it to fail. And now we get the expected behavior when we have invalid data. So now if we want to test we can say create post ads product. So our range is going to be the same, but I'll put in a name. Our act we'll call create, pass in the new object. So we want to check that this object gets added to our list of products. So we want to check what we expect would be our context of product. So it would be the last element in our list of products. So we can say last or default. Should be the same as our product. So our create method should add post method, if it's valid, it should add this new object to our context, which in this case is our in-memory database. So if we call last or default, this should give us the same object. We'll try it. We may have to modify it a little bit. And I didn't put test method above it, so my test doesn't run. So this test passes. So when we create a new product, call the create method and pass it, it gets added to our list of products in our in-memory database as the last item. We also want to check that running this scenario redirects the user back to the index method. So most of this test I can copy. I'll say create post redirect to index. So the arrange and act are going to be the same. In this case, we'll have a redirect result. So it's not a view that's loading, it's a redirect. And what we're asserting are equal is the index, our redirect result, I think it's a redirect result dot action name. Should be index. We'll try this. We have to modify this. So add a new product. And then check that what happens after is that we get redirected to the index method, which loads the index view. So this test passes as well. So if I check the code coverage, my create method will see, I think there's one line that still isn't covered in the create method. There's one thing happening that we have not done any testing for. But we'll run the code analysis, the code coverage tool, just to see where it's at. The edit post is really identical to this. All of the logic is the same. So if we look at our product controller, so under product controller, let's see. So the create, it actually is saying that the create post is 100% covered, which is good. If I turn on the color coding, it shows this as all covered. The one thing we didn't actually check is this though, line 71. If the data is invalid, we've checked that it loads the create view, but we didn't check that the list of categories is passed to the drop-down list. So we could write this as a separate test when we have invalid data. So we can do one more test for this. So if I put it up here, So I'll say create post invalid data populates categories. So I'll arrange, again, I'll create a product and manually create a model error. So the product is invalid. So I'll just copy that in here. So we'll manually create error in model. That will work. We'll pass in product. So we want to check here this, that we have a select list of categories. What I could probably just do is check that this value isn't null. We have some list of categories being returned. We could be a little more specific, but that's probably sufficient for our purposes. We'll say assert is not null. I think we'll have to cast this as a view result. Oops. So if we check our view result dot view data category ID. So this is the name of the object that contains the list of categories, the drop-down list. So we can just make sure there's something there, that property is being populated. So if we save that, it runs as well. So realistically, to fully test that one post method, we probably need 5 tests. If we were going to test the post method for edit, it's exactly the same, except the product, we're editing an existing product that already has an ID, and we call edit. There's a delete post method as well that just takes an ID parameter and it removes that product and redirects. So to test this one, we would just pass in an ID, check that it got removed, and then we could check that we got redirected to the index method as well. So this test would require, this method would probably only require 2 unit tests. Mind you, there is something, I mean, there's other scenarios. What if we get, like if we get an invalid ID, it doesn't remove anything, well, who cares? If we try and delete an ID that doesn't exist, nothing happens. We don't really need a test for that.
Would you use the same concept for async, the ID you pass in?
Yep.
And then delete in your test?
Yep. So we would just call delete confirm, we call post, the post method, we call delete confirmed and pass in an ID number. And we would check that that object was removed, and we would check that we got redirected to index. So we'd really only need 2 unit tests for this one. So you can see, but we didn't test the get method. So we're already up to 9 tests, and we haven't tested the edit post or the delete post, and we haven't tested the get methods for edit, create, and delete. So we probably need I think I originally had said 1920 tests to do it to get full coverage. You'd probably need around 25 tests really to be able to properly test all the different scenarios. So the create post, this one is probably the most complicated. So that was why I decided to cover it. Like I said, the edit tests will be almost identical. Okay, any questions before we wrap up? Jacob? Okay, I do have office hours and I still have some time available. We can't stay here because there is another class, but you can still make it.